Ladies and gentlemen, destiny is not made on the stage, it is formed in the hidden places. We live in a time where people want the spotlight without paying the price, the microphone without the mission, and influence without a close walk with God. But the ways of the kingdom don't change to match the world. Before God uses someone in public, He tests them in private. God hides His strongest instruments in hidden places before He reveals them for their purpose. This truth goes against what society teaches about success, popularity, and meaning. Today, many think that being important starts when others see you, when you go viral, when the lights come on and the crowds cheer. But in God's kingdom, growth starts in the quiet, unseen places. God shapes warriors in caves, not in arenas. The destiny you're praying for needs a strength that can only grow in darkness. Think of a seed. Before it grows into a tree, it is planted deep in the soil. The soil is dark. It's quiet. No one cheers for the seed while it's buried. No one talks about the roots, but those roots are the most important part. Without them, the tree would fall. In the same way, God sometimes puts you in seasons where it feels like nothing is happening. But He's not ignoring you, He's growing you. That's why many of the strongest people don't try to get attention. They've been through seasons of silence. They felt the pain of being gifted but hidden, called but overlooked, ready but held back. That tension is a sacred space. It doesn't mean God forgot you. It means He's shaping you. And the longer He keeps you hidden, the more strength you're gaining to hold what's coming. The stage doesn't build you. The platform can't mold you. Only the shadows can. David was anointed king when he was young, but he didn't go straight to the palace. He went back to the fields, back to caring for sheep. No throne, no fancy clothes, just loneliness, long hours, and being faithful in secret. Why? Because God never promotes without a process. Before David stood before Goliath, he fought a lion and a bear. Nobody saw that. No crowd, no prophet, just David, his sling, and God. That's where real bravery is built. That's where trust in God is formed in battles nobody watches. It's in those hidden places that God removes our hunger for applause. He teaches us to follow His voice, not the cheers of people. He trains us not to crave attention, so that when we are finally seen, we're not fooled by fame. Many people fall after they rise because they skipped the hidden process. They thought being seen meant being ready. But being seen without being ready is risky. If you shine too soon, the light doesn't show your beauty, it shows your flaws. God cares too much about you to skip the shadows. That's where your true intentions are revealed. That's where your honesty is shaped. That's where humility grows. The hidden season isn't just a pause, it's the workshop of your purpose. And workshops are noisy, messy, and private. You might feel stuck. But in God's kingdom, what feels like waiting is really shaping. Take Moses, for example. He grew up in Pharaoh's palace, the place of power. But when God was ready to use him, He didn't use the palace. He sent Moses into the wilderness for 40 years. A prince became a shepherd. The famous became the forgotten. But in those years, Moses learned patience, he learned the land, and most importantly, he learned how to hear God's voice. And when the burning bush appeared, Moses was no longer chasing fame, he was ready for the mission. Even Jesus, the Son of God, didn't start His public work until He was 30. For 30 years, He lived quietly, learning, obeying, and working with His hands. The one who spoke the world into being spent decades making tables in a carpenter's shop. Why? Because before you preach the truth, you must become the truth. God never rushes growth. He's not looking for short-term fame, He wants fruit that lasts. Notice how fruit grows not in the spotlight, but on trees. Trees don't make noise when they grow. They don't show off. But over time, their roots get deeper, their branches spread wider, and fruit starts to show not because they were fast, but because they were steady. Likewise, when God hides you, He's strengthening your foundation. So when it's time to produce fruit, you won't break under the pressure. This is not how the world works. The world looks for charm. God looks for depth. The world lifts up talent. God lifts up those who are steady, and steadiness is only built in quiet times. You don't lay a foundation on the roof, you build it underground. So don't hate the hidden place. The dirt isn't there to bury you, it's there to grow you. When God prepares someone for a public calling, He first works on them in private. He hides you because He loves you. He covers you so you can be formed. He keeps people from seeing you so your eyes can stay focused on Him. You may feel invisible, but you're not unimportant. You're being saved for something special. A soldier doesn't carry his weapon until it's time for battle. In the same way, God doesn't reveal His weapons until the war is ready. You are not being punished during this season, you're being trusted. God hides what is precious. He covers what is costly. And when your character is ready, when your heart is pure and your thoughts are right, He will bring you into the open, not just to impress, but to make a difference. Until that moment, stay rooted. Stay close to God. Stay loyal even when it feels pointless, because what begins in quietness will echo forever. God never lifts someone by mistake. In His kingdom, rising up is not random, and influence is not given because someone wants it. It's earned through private victories. Every purpose is proven not by talent but by testing. Before God places anything on your head, He places something on your back. Before you wear the crown of being seen, you must carry the weight of being responsible. This is not punishment, it's training. It's in those hidden fights, the ones no one claps for, that God sees if you're ready. Many people want to be on the stage but don't want the journey. They want to speak but not carry the weight that comes with it. But heaven doesn't give out microphones without checking if your shoulders can hold the message. You don't just receive influence, you have to show you can handle it. That's why God tests you in secret. Not to hurt you, but to see if you're ready. He's not focused on your talent, He's looking at your attitude. And your true attitude shows under pressure. Testing isn't for God to discover who you are, He already knows. It's for you to see who you're becoming. It's easy to feel strong when nothing is expected of you. It's easy to think you have faith when nothing is testing it. But real strength grows through difficulty. God allows trials that humble you, delays that teach you patience, and tests that show your heart, not because He's harsh, but because He's wise. He knows what you've been asking for. He also knows what it really takes to carry it. His tests are always preparing you. Look at Joseph. He had a dream from God, a vision of leadership, greatness, and power. But what came next wasn't a celebration. It was betrayal, slavery, false charges, and prison. For 13 years, Joseph passed test after test, the test of being honest, the test of staying loyal, the test of holding back. Could he stay faithful in Potiphar's house? Could he keep his heart clean when tempted? Could he hold on to his dream even in jail? Joseph didn't wear the crown until he carried the weight of waiting, of injustice, and of being forgotten. And when the time finally came to speak before Pharaoh, Joseph didn't take the credit. He said, "It is not in me, God will give Pharaoh the answer." That's what God looks for, not just talent, but surrender. Not just knowledge, but good character. Purpose is heavy, and if you're not trained to hold it, it will crush you. That's why God doesn't give it all at once. He stretches you little by little. He tests you with small things first. How do you treat people who can't help you? How do you act when no one is watching? Can you obey even if it costs you something? These are the real tests, not the ones in front of crowds, but the ones in quiet places. Not the ones with awards, but the ones that leave scars. Before David became king, he had the chance to kill Saul, the man trying to kill him, and take the throne early. But David passed the test. He said, "I will not harm the Lord's anointed." That wasn't just a smart move, it was a private victory in the dark that allowed him to lead in the light. Even Jesus was tested before he started his ministry. Before he preached or healed, he went into the desert for 40 days minus 40 days of hunger, silence, and battle. When Satan tried to get him to prove himself, to show off, to skip the hard road, Jesus answered with God's word, not emotion. That's how you know someone is ready. They don't perform to be noticed, they obey because of purpose. Testing seasons are holy seasons. They show who really wants to serve and who just wants to be seen. They reveal who's real and who's just acting. And God will always prepare you in a place that doesn't look like the promise. That's the test. Can you believe what he said when nothing around you shows it? Sometimes the test looks like being alone. Sometimes it looks like being misunderstood, ignored, or treated unfairly. But in every test, God is watching not just what you do, but who you are inside. Are you becoming bitter or better? Are you getting proud or staying prayerful? Are you seeking revenge or trusting God with the result? You can preach well and still fail the test. You can be famous and still not be favored by God. Because the test isn't about how good you look, it's about your inner life. Can you still say yes when doors stay closed? Can you still serve when no one notices? Can you still live right when it would be easier to compromise? The test isn't exciting. It's not shiny, but it's needed. God uses secret seasons to build strong people. He cares more about who you are than how popular you become. Because if you're pure, His Spirit can flow through you. But if pride or ego cracks your heart, that blessing will leak out. And what was meant to help others will feel like a weight on you before the microphone. There has to be pressure before there is glory. There has to be the grind before the reward, and before the crown there must be the shaping. God is not only preparing you for a platform, He's preparing you for eternity. In God's kingdom, nothing happens by chance, neither your calling nor your trials. The test you are facing is not a mistake. It's not an interruption. It's part of your path. You don't get to select your hardships, deserts, or breaking moments. They are purposefully designed, carefully set, and perfectly shaped for what you are destined to carry. Your test is not a general one. It is personal. Heaven doesn't send mass-produced trials, it sends custom-made tests that fit the weight of your purpose. When God calls someone, He doesn't just give them a task. He begins preparation, and that preparation often looks like pressure. The fire used to purify gold is different from the heat needed to shape clay. In the same way, your preparation will not look like someone else's, which is why comparing your journey is harmful. You can't compare your test to another person's timing, blessing, or hardship. What God is forming in you is specific. What He is building in you is unlike anything else. You don't get to choose the wilderness, and you don't get to schedule your breaking point. It picks you. And when it arrives, it usually comes wrapped in contradiction. You ask for direction and feel confusion. You pray for strength and face weakness. You seek favor and instead feel rejection. Why? Because the test isn't for your comfort, it's for your capacity. God is enlarging your capacity to carry the calling, and the only way to do that is to stretch you beyond what feels comfortable. Think about Abraham. He didn't sign up to be tested by being asked to sacrifice his son. He didn't wake up thinking, "Lord, give me a major test of faith today." But the test chose him because of what he carried. God had already promised Abraham would be the father of many nations. But before he could step fully into that promise, he had to show that the promise wasn't more important to him than the one who gave it. That test wasn't random. It was intentional. It was God asking, "Can I trust you with blessing without losing you to it?" The test doesn't come to tear you apart, it comes to reveal who you are. It comes to bring out your strengths and expose your weak spots, not to shame you, but to shape you. God is the perfect builder. He knows what has to be shaken before you step into greater authority. He knows the roots that must be removed, the attitudes that need changing, and the habits that must be broken. And the only way to get rid of those things is to let the test speak louder than your comfort zone. When you look at the people God used in great ways, you'll see their lives weren't just marked by miracles, but also by moments of serious testing. Job didn't choose his test. He didn't ask for loss, sorrow, or suffering. But the test found him because heaven had already selected him. "Have you considered my servant Job?" God asked the enemy. That wasn't a punishment, it was God showing off Job's faith. God trusted Job with pain not because he wanted to see him hurt, but because he knew Job could carry something others couldn't. Sometimes the test is actually heaven's compliment. And here's something important about kingdom testing. The bigger the calling, the harder the test. The greater the mission, the more intense the preparation. Elijah called fire from heaven, but first he had to be fed by birds in solitude. Paul impacted entire nations with his letters, but first he was blinded and hidden away. Even Jesus had to pass through the wilderness test before he healed, taught, or raised the dead. His test matched the depth of his purpose. This is why you cannot simply pray the test away. You can't fast it away. You can't command it to leave if it was sent to shape you. The test isn't your enemy, it's your training. And it trains with detail. It will touch your pride, your fears, your desire for control, your doubts, because God isn't just testing what you know. He's testing how you respond. He's checking your willingness to surrender when things don't add up, your heart to worship before the answer comes, your obedience even when the cost is greater than expected. Sometimes we pray, "Lord, use me," but we don't always understand that before God uses you, He examines you. And that examination isn't scheduled around your comfort, it's centered around your calling. You might be crying under the pressure of the test, but heaven sees purpose in what you're going through. What you're enduring isn't pointless. It's measured, it's exact, it's set by God. He didn't pick this test because it was easy. He picked it because it was necessary. You didn't pick your storm. You didn't choose your current season. But heaven chose you for it not to crush you, but to shape you. Not to punish you, but to train you. Every tear, every silent moment, every delay is working to bring your purpose to life. When you come through it, you won't just have a story, you'll have real spiritual authority. Because no one carries true power without going through real preparation. The test you are walking through is not stopping your destiny, it is your pathway to it. God's hand doesn't press down to break you, but to shape you. In the kingdom, testing doesn't destroy, it activates. The fire you're feeling isn't your end, it's your beginning. You're not being buried, you're being planted. The test you are walking through is not proof of God turning away, it's evidence of His investment in you. If God is testing you, it means He sees something in you that's worth developing. He doesn't waste pressure on people with no potential. The test is a tool. It's heaven's way of growing the strength in you that you didn't even know was there. Many people think a season of crushing means God is mad at them. But often, it means God is building them. He's not trying to break your spirit, He's developing your backbone. He's building endurance, wisdom, and trust in your heart. Yes, it's painful. But pain in the process doesn't mean something is broken. It usually means something is growing. Now think of the caterpillar. It doesn't become a butterfly while resting. It has to push and fight its way through the cocoon. That hard process is what gives it wings strong enough to fly. When God prepares someone for purpose, He always begins on the inside. You might be asking for blessings, for promotion, for breakthrough, but God is after internal strength, firmness, humility, stability. You pray for doors to open, but God is focused on making sure your foundation is strong. Why? Because a weak foundation under a heavy calling leads to collapse. So God tests you not out of anger, but to anchor you. It's in pressure that the truth comes out. Pressure doesn't invent your weaknesses, it reveals them. It shows the cracks in your trust, the limits of your belief, the motives behind your actions. God doesn't show you these things to make you feel bad. He shows them so He can heal you, build what matters, and remove what doesn't. When gold is refined by fire, the impurities come to the top. That's what pressure does. It separates the real from the fake. And the goal isn't to ruin the gold, it's to purify it so it's more valuable. The test then becomes holy. It's not something you run away from. It's something you walk through with understanding. This is not disorder. This is God fine-tuning your life. He is measuring your honesty and consistency not for applause, but for real purpose. He's asking, can you handle what I'm about to give you? Will you still obey me when it costs you more than you thought? Will you still believe when everything looks unclear? These are the questions the test is answering. Look at Peter, bold, full of fire, loyal. Yet Jesus told him, Satan has asked and has to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith won't fail. Why? Because Peter's future wasn't just about following Jesus, it was about leading others. He was going to be a foundation in the early church. But before he could speak boldly at Pentecost, he had to be sifted behind the scenes. His pride had to be broken. His confidence had to be humbled, and when he failed, when he denied Jesus, it wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. That failure laid the groundwork for a different kind of faith, not loud and arrogant, but strong and steady. That's why we have to rethink how we see the test. What looks like your lowest point might actually be your turning point. You're not being pushed away, you're being pushed deeper, deeper in prayer, deeper in trust, deeper in knowing who you really are. God will let the pressure remove what was built on ego so He can rebuild you on truth. He'll close doors you depended on so He can open the ones that truly fit your future. And yes, He will do it with accuracy, with care and with love, even when it feels like loss. You think of a potter. When he sees a flaw in the clay, he doesn't throw it away. He pushes it down, adds water, and begins to shape it again, not because it's useless, but because it's worth fixing. That pressure isn't rejection, it's redemption. That shaping isn't punishment, it's preparation. And the more time the potter spends on the clay, the more valuable it becomes. The pressure has purpose. It is forming you into the image God had in mind from the beginning. Even Jesus went through the press. In Gethsemane, meaning olive press, he felt the full weight of his mission. The pressure was so deep he sweat blood. But that crushing moment opened the door to resurrection, because in God's kingdom, oil flows only from what has been pressed. Glory follows what has been crushed. The test didn't come to destroy the Son, it came to reveal the Spirit through him. So if you're feeling the pressure, if it feels like life is closing in, lean in. The test is building you. It's carving something eternal into you. Your patience is growing. Your vision is sharpening. Your heart is becoming stronger. And when the pressure passes, what rises from that season won't be fragile, it will be unshakable. You'll speak with fresh authority. You'll lead with a grace that comes not from being seen, but from being shaped. The test is not the end. It's the proof that God still sees something in you worth building. God doesn't anoint your show, He anoints your sincerity. Public power means little without private purity. The applause of people is light. The approval of God is heavy, and that weight, the real presence of God, only rests on those who've been refined in private. Heaven isn't impressed by your loudness on stage, it listens to your quiet surrender behind closed doors. Before God gives influence, He checks for honesty. Before He gives power, He checks for purity. Because the spotlight is heavy, and without a solid character underneath, it won't lift you, it'll crush you. Many don't fall because they lacked skill, but because they lacked purity. What you overcome in private shapes what you can carry in public. You can sing, preach, and build great things, but if your private life isn't set apart, your success can become your trap. That's why God may hold back your visibility, not because you aren't chosen, but because He's making sure your heart doesn't ruin your gift. Purity isn't about being perfect. It's about being aligned. It's when your inner life lines up with what heaven wants to do through you. It's when your intentions have been examined, your pride has been laid down, and your hunger is not for recognition, but for God's presence. That kind of purity can't be faked or copied. It has to be formed in quietness, in hidden places, and sometimes in complete silence. Think about David. Before he wore a crown, he played a harp. Before he led a nation, he was alone with sheep. But it wasn't just shepherding God cared about, it was the purity of his heart in the wilderness. David learned to worship without an audience. He learned to fight lions and bears when no one was watching. He learned to seek God not for status but for closeness. So when he faced Goliath, it wasn't only about the sling, it was about the secret battles he'd already won. That's what gave him power in public, purity in private. You can't borrow holiness. You can't pretend to have character. You can't act like you have devotion. These things are formed through unseen decisions. What you say yes to when no one is watching, that's what qualifies you. What you say no to, even when it hurts, that's what builds your strength. God pays attention to how you deal with your thoughts, your time, your temptations. He sees how you manage your body, your relationships, your duties. These things aren't just about good behavior, they're spiritual doorways. Purity isn't just about being clean. It's about having clear access to heaven's plans, heaven's voice, and heaven's authority. Your talents might open doors for you, but only a pure heart can handle what's inside. That's why many rise quickly but fall just as fast. Their inner life couldn't carry the weight of their public life. They took over stages but didn't win over secret struggles. They built ministries but never built altars. They gained followers but lost their soul. Because power without purity is risky. It turns into control. It turns into performance. It turns into emptiness. And God loves you too much to let your skill outpace your character. When God calls someone, He starts by cleaning their heart. He shapes, He corrects, He brings conviction. Not because He's mean, but because He's holy. He won't pour oil into a container that's leaking through compromise. He won't pour out favor if it's going to feed your ego. He won't promote you if it will puff you up. So He goes deep. He digs into the pride, the lust, the selfish ambition, the anger not to shame you but to make you pure. Because what you conquer in the quiet will decide what you can carry in the open. Even Jesus showed us this. Before He spoke to crowds, He went away to be alone. Before He did miracles, He fasted and prayed. He lived with such careful purity that when He spoke, demons trembled not just because of His words, but because of who He was. His authority didn't come from a title. It came from purity. He had nothing to prove because He had nothing to hide. He didn't just visit the Father when things got hard. He walked with Him daily. That's our example. That's our target. So if you feel invisible, delayed, or hidden, ask yourself this: what is God cleaning in me? What is He fixing now so He can protect me later? Don't be upset about the season of refining. Don't try to rush through the quiet place. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's God saying, I'm building something that won't fall apart. He doesn't just want you to rise, He wants you to stay strong. And you can't stay strong in power if you haven't stayed strong in purity. Every time you choose holiness over compromise, every time you choose prayer over pretending, every time you choose the secret place instead of the spotlight, you're building spiritual weight. You're proving yourself trustworthy. You're being molded. And one day, when God puts you in the open, the power you carry won't come from your background, it'll come from your purity. Not because you were perfect, but because you were aligned. Not because of your image, but because of your identity. And that's what keeps revival alive. That's what changes lives, not just talent, but a clean heart. In God's kingdom, there are no shortcuts to purpose. You can't speed up what heaven wants to slowly shape. The waiting isn't wasted, it's God's careful design. That's where He builds the strength to carry what He promised. If you try to skip it, you end up broken. You grab the crown without carrying the cross. You want the end result without the molding of obedience. But God, in His love, won't hand you something that will destroy you. He's too wise to let you walk into a promise that your heart can't handle. God's promises are like weapons, powerful, precise, and dangerous if misused. They can break chains or hurt others, depending on who holds them. And just like a good soldier wouldn't hand a loaded gun to someone untrained, God won't release kingdom power to someone who hasn't been trained in private. A weapon only works when the person using it has been taught, tested, and trained. Without that, it's just reckless potential, and that always leads to destruction. This is why the wilderness matters. It's not a wrong turn, it's a classroom. It's not where dreams die, it's where dreams grow up. In the wilderness, God teaches you to trust when you can't feel Him, to obey when you don't have answers, to serve when no one sees. These aren't just struggles, they're strategic lessons. And if you try to run from that training, if you try to cheat your way through it, you'll end up in places you were never meant to go. Think about Moses. He was born to deliver people, raised in luxury, familiar with power. But when he tried to lead too soon, he killed a man and ran away. Why? Because he had passion but no wisdom. He had purpose but no humility. So God took him to the desert for 40 years. Not because the promise was gone, but because the man needed growth. Only after the wilderness could Moses stand before Pharaoh not with a weapon of flesh, but with the rod of God. That rod wasn't just about miracles, it showed that his authority had been shaped. When you try to skip God's training, you lose the chance to carry what you were made for. because power in immature hands breeds pride, and pride always leads to a fall. What God wants to do through you requires deep roots, not just bright lights. He cares more about who you're becoming than what you're doing. The process removes selfishness so the promise doesn't become your idol. He crushes the parts of you that would compete with him when you're finally seen. The goal isn't just to get the promise, it's to arrive with clean hands and a pure heart. Joseph had dreams when he was young, but they didn't come true right away. He was thrown in a pit, sold, lied about, locked up and left behind. But every chapter was part of God's plan. In Potiphar's house, Joseph learned to manage what wasn't his. In prison, he learned to understand others. So when Pharaoh called him up, Joseph had more than dreams, he had discipline. He had more than vision, he had values. The process didn't cancel the promise, it prepared him to carry it with grace. That's why growing spiritually is not optional. You can't live out a spiritual purpose with a worldly mind. You can't handle eternal work with emotional instability. You must let God stretch you, shape you, and correct you. Let him confront your jealousy, your insecurities, your craving for attention. These aren't small issues, they're cracks in your vessel. And God, the perfect potter, will keep shaping you until you can hold the glory he's about to pour. Some want big platforms without prayer, attention without intercession, fame without vision. But God doesn't think like people do. He looks for a steady heart before he gives a strategy. He looks for purity before he gives power. If you still crave titles, you're not ready for your task. If you get hurt every time someone overlooks you, you're not ready to lead. If you need everyone's approval, you're not ready to carry resurrection life. The process brings these things to the surface not to shame you, but to free you. When God holds back the promise, he's not being cruel, he's being kind. Because a promise that hasn't been prepared is a heavy burden. A blessing in the wrong season can be a curse. If God gave you all you wanted today, could your heart handle it tomorrow? Could your mind manage it? Would your soul stay pure when the spotlight comes? These are the questions the process answers. God's timing isn't just about when. It's about who. He's not just setting up the moment, he's shaping the person. If you skip the process, you harm the very calling you were made to fulfill. Destiny requires strength, and strength comes from discipline, not just dreams. So stay in the secret place. Stay where he's shaping you. Let him complete his work in you. Don't push open doors. Don't climb your way up with tricks. Don't chase shortcuts. Trust the fire. Trust the forming. Because when the time is right, you won't just step into the promise, you'll be ready to carry it, keep it, and spread it for God's glory. So I say to you, don't run from the process. Don't quit your assignment because it doesn't look the way you pictured. Don't leave the place of testing, it is holy ground. Heaven doesn't measure greatness by how high you climb, but by how deep your roots go. What you do in private speaks louder in eternity than what you show in public. God is not rushing to make you popular, he's focused on making you faithful. Because if he finds a man who's pure in the dark, he'll trust him in the light. If he sees a woman worshipping when no one watches, he'll let her lead when all eyes are on her. The real platform isn't a stage, it's your secret place. So endure the breaking. Stay faithful in the silence. Pass the test, because when the time comes, when heaven declares it's your moment, no demon, no delay, no system, no human will be able to stop what God has prepared and appointed. When he says it's your season, even hidiness will bow to your destiny. You are not being buried. You are being planted. And when the process is complete, you won't just carry the promise, you will become the promise.